Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. He's back. Alex Caruso. Hey, buddy.
What's going on? I appreciate you having me. What a time of year. The midway point in the season is where things are about to get really hot really quick.
Dude, it's getting hot and heavy. It's getting hot and heavy. We're going to talk about Will Levis today. Cody Carpentier, man. Cody Carpentier. Every time I would ask him, I'd be like, Cody, Will Levis, he was pretty inefficient and a really bad decision maker. But you're sure? And he's like, I'm sure. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about Will Levis. Don't worry about Will Levis. You don't have to worry about Will Levis. And I was like, really, Cody? Because I'm not sure. I like him. I respect the arm talent. I love arm talent. Right? I'm never going to write off a guy ever again since Josh Allen. Right? Josh Allen proved that you could be super mistake prone and not efficient at all in college, and if you have a huge arm, it can translate. So fool me once, dude. So I'm with you, but I can't quite get there in terms of the certainty that you have that this guy's good. And he's like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about Will Levis. Will Levis is not someone you need to worry about. And then I'm like, he hasn't played, man. I'm like, when's he gonna play? And then he has the best debut.
How would you expect? I mean, that was just unbelievable. I mean, what he did. Like, I know people are clowning it because it's broken plays, but he made pretty much every throw that he needed to make that game, especially when it counted.
And I was like, listen, we're gonna keep this guy posted up, right? We're gonna keep Levis higher than consensus. Don't worry, Cody. Don't worry, but just know that I'm not 100% on board with this. I wish he had better stats, bro. But I trust you. And I'm so glad we trusted him. I'm so glad we trusted Cody on that. He knows things, man. That's why you go to the Senior Bowl. That's why you go to the Pro Bowl. That's why you go, not to the Pro Bowl. Well, yes, you go to the Pro Bowl sometimes because you see guys in the skills competition. But you go to the combine, those things. You need to get the full picture. You can't just look at a guy's stats from Kentucky when he didn't have any receivers. It's not fair.
It's crazy when it takes just one game, though. Like it wasn't like an acclimation period of a couple games. Like it was like training wheels are right off and right into the madness. Like that doesn't happen that often.
I was trying to remember if anyone remembers. I asked the chat if they remembered anybody that has had the kind of debut quarterback having that kind of splashy rookie debut.
Is there anyone?
I couldn't think of one. I mean, I'm sure there are. I just off the top of my head. The problem is there's a bunch of quarterbacks Kirk Cousins didn't play as a rookie. There's a bunch of quarterbacks that didn't play as rookies at all, and that some that had like Jared Goff that had some of the most abysmal rookie seasons you've ever imagined, and they were trapped on teams that didn't have a DeAndre Hopkins. So there's a lot of quarterbacks just find themselves in situations where they can't. And then C.J. Stroud, we've seen a game like that, but it wasn't the first game.
Yep.
Right? So then they have to have had that game, and then that game has to have been the first game. It's very rare.
Yeah, I think it's going to be someone random, like in 1962 that you've never heard of, but Grandpa knows, that had that breakout game. Like that is just rare among rare, and I'm excited to see we'll see him Thursday night.
Well, Cody is actually in the chat, and Cody says that the last one might have been Mariota.
Wow.
We're in the same number for the same team, the Titans. Isn't that crazy?
How about that?
That's some good knowledge. It's good. Great to have Cody in the chat. Love that. Love that. So I'll bring you on. You're with the 33rd team now. You're doing some podcasts with Josh, right?
Yep, doing it with Josh and Ben Wolby every single Wednesday, talking a lot of everything you need to know for fantasy. Buy lows, sell highs, trade targets, start sits.
You're doing buy lows and sell highs?
How could you not?
Nice.
It's like peanut butter and jelly, buy lows and sell highs.
You gotta buy low, you gotta sell high. Do you like the show sheet? Do you like what you're seeing with the show sheet?
Oh, I could not get enough of it. There's a lot of topics. There's some Rachaad White on there. I mean, you can never get enough.
Yeah, we're not. People are like, you out on Rachaad White. When are you going to come to Jesus on Rachaad White? When are you going to take the L on Rachaad White? I'm like, why don't we give him a few more weeks? The next thing you know, it's like, what was he like? 7 for 7 or something for like 80 yards as a receiver.
He's the running back 22 right now. That's lower than where he was drafted.
Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program. A young gun! Oh, one of the youngest guns in the industry. A high-rising young fella from New England. Yes, that's right. And now he's with the 33rd team. He's a big podcast talent, social media wizard. Here with me today it is Alex Caruso!
Let's go!
Talk to me.
That is the best intro I think I've ever gotten on a podcast in my whole life. That is anytime I want to play serious, I will always get pretty hyped up about that. I cannot wait for today.
Will Levis is the talk of the town. He's the talk of fantasy football. He's the talk of the NFL. And it's just guy comes completely out of nowhere, off the bench. And it wasn't out of nowhere. He was viewed by many as the best quarterback in the draft during the process. There were a lot of people that had him posted up number one. So, not the biggest surprise, but then suddenly he's not a first-round pick, and he's not in contention to start the season. He's technically behind Malik Willis on the depth chart. So that's how the guy gets pushed into obscurity, and then he just kind of comes out of the primordial soup in week 8 and gives you 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Amazing.
It's beyond amazing. We don't ever see rookie debuts like that, and for him to throw that many touchdowns, I think Marcus Mariota, the only one to really do that anytime recently that anyone can find. So, it's amazing to see, and I feel like when guys have debuts that big, how can you not end up pretty well to be able to walk into your first game like that? It doesn't happen by accident.
If you're a rookie starting your first game for the Tennessee Titans wearing number 8, you're going to be great. Whether it's Mariota, whether it's Levis, you're going to go out, throw for 4 touchdowns, look great. And we always have to, last couple shows, always you have to tip your cap to the man that had the most conviction in Will Levis, the player profiler, homegrown talent that is Cody Carpentier, right? You have to give him an applause line. Right? I was thinking about him. I was like, oh man, he must be so happy right now. Because again, it's like he's just like, don't worry about it, guys. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about Will Levis. Don't talk about Will Levis. I couldn't be, any more confident that eventually he's going to get an opportunity and he's going to, crush expectations. And I was like, okay, man. Okay, I guess eventually it's going to happen. We'll see when it happens. And then I think it was just a perfect time to unleash a guy. This is, I think, the optimal time to insert a rookie into the starting lineup around week 7, week 8, week 9, because they can get a half of a season in and they don't have all the pressure of starting week 1, and they can get acclimated to the league with that extra month and a half that the Bryce Youngs weren't afforded. Do you think there's any way next, let's say, 8 games, okay, that Will Levis can do enough to surpass Bryce Young in Dynasty?
Oh, that's a great question. I think he can. If he puts up anything like he did in week 1, like that, if that continues, because I think the thing for people is all they want to see is like someone that's taller with a big arm. Bryce Young is not either of those things. Like, I think Bryce Young's fantastic, but if they see the big, strong guy and then they start seeing the Josh Allen comparisons, Bryce Young's never going to get Josh Allen comparisons. So all they want to see is the next Mahomes or Josh Allen, and then people will be bought into him pretty quick.
Have you seen my Bryce Young impression? Have you seen it?
I don't think I have.
Have you seen it? Are you ready? Hey guys,
Yeah.
sorry, trying to find some throwing lanes between my linemen.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's that simple. I mean,
it doesn't have to be hard. You want your
what's it?
quarterbacks to have size, athleticism, and downfield throwing ability like a Josh Allen. I
It's
think
Zach
that Josh
Wilson.
Allen is one of the reasons why it's possible that Will Levis can surpass Bryce Young, because we've seen Josh Allen do it. He's proved that you don't need to be an efficient college quarterback to, be a prolific NFL quarterback. And then if we go back, Jay Cutler did the same thing. There's been a long history of relatively inefficient college quarterbacks coming in and totally airing it out in the NFL and having great success. So, yes, it's very possible. It's also because he was a well-regarded recruit, and many in the mock draft community and some of the most respected draft analysts like Cody Carpentier had Will Levis as a top 10 talent. It makes it a lot easier to push him ahead of Bryce Young in Dynasty, as opposed to a guy that comes out of complete obscurity. And then it's like, well, wait a second. Like, this is, I don't want to be Davis Millsed, right? You're not worried about being Davis Millsed by a guy that was viewed as a top 10 talent by a lot of analysts.
Yeah. And all people want to see as far as Dynasty is upside. I mean, like, if you watch, Bryce Young's best highlights versus Will Levis's best one-game highlights in the NFL, everyone's going to target the guy that's throwing the ball like crazy to someone like DeAndre Hopkins rather than the little guy, trying to find a lane to throw to Adam Thielen. So, I mean, he's probably one or two big games away already from being pretty close to surpassing Bryce Young. All people need is just a little bit more than that one game to start believing pretty quick.
Do you have DeAndre Hopkins ahead of Adam Thielen in all formats?
That's a great question. I'm going to say I definitely do ahead of Adam Thielen.
Yeah,
I think
this is one of the most real single game performances I've ever seen. In fact, in many ways, what we saw from DeAndre Hopkins was more real than what we saw from Will Levis. Because we know Will Levis now definitively an upgrade, and he just needed that upgrade, and he needed a quarterback that's willing to push the ball to the boundary in a way that Ryan Tannehill was not. So now we know that we have a quarterback where those routes are in play in a lot more game situations than they were with Ryan Tannehill, which means he's just going to get fed more, and the targets are going to be easier to catch. And that's what we're going to see for the rest of the season. I'm extremely excited for DeAndre Hopkins the rest of the season.
I'm not. I am because I think there's going to be some big games. I mean, my worry has been the worry by the whole season is just the pass volume. I mean, no one's passing less times per game right now than the Titans. And again, yes, there's the whole, okay, well, what if they just unleash Will Levis? But under Mike Vrabel for 6 straight years now, they've never been above the bottom 5 in pass attempts. And wide receivers generally, it's really rare they end up as a top 12 guy on teams that are bottom 5 in pass attempts. The only guys to do it in the last 10 years were Debo and then Dez Bryant back in 2013.
However, the Titans were up 14-3 in that game, and Will Levis still threw the ball 30 times.
That's a good point.
There's not a choice. It doesn't matter. They can't stop anybody, especially in the secondary. All right. So whenever the Titans face a prolific pass attack, they find themselves down early. This is what happens. Okay. This is why the best thing that you can look at that's not necessarily tied to the quarterback himself or his supporting weaponry is that quarterback secondary. Why do you think Sam Howell's been the best streamer all year? Right? Because the secondary in Washington is the worst in the league. And they're always playing from behind. They know they have to put up 30 points. And historically, the Titans have had a great front seven and an adequate secondary. Now they're experiencing some injuries. The secondary has been abysmal. So it's actually exactly what you would want as a quarterback, where they're going to be forcing other teams to throw. A lot of those teams are going to throw successfully. You're going to be down, and it's going to force Mike Vrabel's hand in the second half. He's not going to be able to hand the ball off when they're down 10. They're going to have to give the ball. And you already saw it in the first game that they're like, hey, Will, throw the ball 30 times with an 11-point lead. Holy shit.
It's a lot of, yeah.
This is why I'm hopeful. I mean, we know that the overall pass volume is not there, but it's a very consolidated route inventory, right? And target tree in Tennessee. And when Burks comes back, it's not like Burks is going to become the alpha. No, but Burks is going to have some spike weeks too. That's the beauty. He saved Burks also.
Yeah.
Like Burks was dead. And the fact that anyone drafted Burks with the hope that he was going to surpass and supplant DeAndre Hopkins, that was always a fiction. But now Will Levis changes all the math. And now Burks is like a really interesting stash, right?
He's super interesting. I mean, I think Will Levis is definitely a big buy as far as fantasy goes. We saw Ryan Tannehill be really productive in this offense just because of the effectiveness of Derrick Henry in play action. And that's only going to open up the game for DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks. And well, yes, part of me is the low pass attempts, but like the way this offense works, like you alluded to, was they are the perfect offense to be super efficient. This isn't just a low volume passing offense. It's every pass is so much more valuable because they have a Derrick Henry and they have play action that increases the value of every passing target on those downs.
And when they're down 10 and the defense knows they have to throw, because it's Derrick Henry, they are going to pause for a second.
Yeah.
Right? Even if you're down 10, play action to Derrick Henry works in a way that play action to other running backs doesn't work. So I love that. Here's another interesting observation. Sam LaPorta is the tight end 1 in fantasy for Dynasty.
I don't disagree whatsoever. I mean, he's on.
I saying it out loud feels weird, but in talking to Theo last night, it's not up for dispute. I just want to make sure you were cool with this, Alex.
There's no dispute at all, like zero. I mean, no. I mean, it's hard to make a case that like it's even disputable given everything that we've seen. Like, there's no data point or situation point. There's no Arthur Smith, Kyle Pitts, anything. Like they have Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra. And Sam LaPorta is still coming out right away and being this good this quickly. And I think that he's on pace to beat the rookie record for tight end fantasy points by like 30 or 40 points right now.
Woo! It's happening. Yeah, I mean, who you're gonna say Mark Andrews? Mark Andrews 28.
That would have, yeah. Wow.
Right? Mark Andrews 28, man. So is George Kittle. These guys are 28 years old. Sam LaPorta is 22, and he's outproducing these guys. I mean, good luck. I mean, good luck to anyone that wants to make an argument. The only argument is, well, it's Travis Kelce until otherwise. That's like the one argument I've heard is like Travis Kelce until he starts slowing down, ignore the age, right? And I'm pretty amenable to that argument. I like that argument with Travis Kelce. I'm also here for that argument with like a Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey and Travis Kelce have been two of the best players to draft in dynasty startups because they drop a couple rounds for no reason other than just perceived age slowdown that is being projected on them, which hasn't actually manifested. So that's why they've been two of the best dynasty picks the last 3 years have been McCaffrey and Kelce just on value. But when you look at this tight end class, this rookie tight end class, woo!
It's on pace to be the greatest, ever. I think one of the things about Sam LaPorta that's so fascinating to me is that, I like loved Sam LaPorta from a dynasty perspective, but I didn't like him this year because if you go back to 2000, there have been just 2 top 12 tight ends like to finish like as a rookie in the top 12 and being drafted round 2 or later. 2 in 23 years. And Sam LaPorta is about to be one of those tight end ones this year.
And it's not out of the realm of possibility for Dalton Kincaid
No.
to go completely ham for the rest of the season. Back-to-back weeks with Dawson Knox on IR, 15.5 fantasy points and 17.5 fantasy points.
It's crazy. I mean, it's same thing like I just mentioned with the same LaPorta. If you include round 1 and round 2 tight ends to be in the top 12 as a rookie, there's only been 6 ever. 4 of them were in the first round, 2 of them were in the second round or later. So that just like more, if those two do it together, I mean, after 6 and 23 years, for 2 to do it in 1 year is like just beyond like unprecedented.
And then you have to remember Luke Musgrave is technically even more athletic than those guys. Just looking at size-adjusted athleticism, though Musgrave, he only got the 3 targets, but that's because Jordan Love is an embarrassment, right? I mean, I was expecting more from Luke Musgrave because like he was the target leader in week 7. So that, hey, coming into this week, this is a great spot to think about streaming Luke Musgrave. No, you can't. Oh, you can't get every rookie tight end to line up and produce in the same week. That's not good. But in totality, this class, incredible. Luke Musgrave will have weeks. I can promise you that.
He's due. I mean, he's due to have some big ones, especially given the lack of performance from their wide receiver room, contrary to what we would have expected so far this year. I mean, I don't think they've all been like Romeo Doubs has been bad, but Christian Watson's been injured, and I don't think they've had a consistent number 1 option every week, which is more the point.
So would you say this is bad if a guy gets 9 targets, okay, and he gives you 18 yards on those targets, but he bails you out with a touchdown, right? You're absolutely allowed to say he's bad. Okay, that's very bad. Romeo Doubs, very bad. 2 yards a target. That's no good, man. And some of those are drops. Some of those are bad routes. I mean, this is not like bad luck. This is bad player. Okay, where you have Jaden Reed, 6 targets, 83 yards. So they need to consolidate this target distribution just around Reed, Watson, and Musgrave. If they could do that, if they could just find a way to marginalize Dobbs, get him out of there, then the offense might actually start to produce. But Jordan Love has the worst ball placement in the league. And this is a team that is now 2-5, and they need to be trading all the pieces. I think it's partly an issue that because the team is owned by the city, that there isn't like an edict from above, right? And those edict from above can be illegal, right? Like we saw the Dolphins, Stephen Ross was bribing coaches, right? And this isn't an accusation. This isn't like, oh, allegedly. No, they had to forfeit a draft pick because he was found to be bribing coaches to lose on purpose. So that's the thing with Green Bay. They don't have that. They don't have an edict from above that says, we need to unload everybody that's on an expiring contract, that's over 28 years old, that we're paying any money to whatsoever, get rid of everybody, and let's get the best possible draft picks next year. Green Bay doesn't really have that. They have just a community of equity holders. So I think they're just going to ride it out and just see what happens instead of trying to trade everybody at the deadline, which they should, but it's not happening.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to happen. I mean, especially like you said, they're owned by the city, and that's probably why a lot of what we've seen the last couple of years from them, just in the fact that like they've never been that great because they don't have that decision maker. So maybe we're wrong for expecting a lot in fantasy from a new regime when we don't have an Aaron Rodgers or Devontae Adams to save the day. All they have is a team that can be a little bit directionless because they don't have, somebody up above to come save them or force them into doing a move that they probably don't want to do. I mean, is that unfair to say?
When was the last time you saw Green Bay do a splashy trade?
I can't even think of one.
Right. When was the last time you ever saw Green Bay that had more than just one pick in every round? Right. How often does Green Bay have a ton of compensatory picks? They don't. They're not out here making moves, man. They're just they're that fantasy owner in your dynasty league that's not making any trades. If you try to trade with them, the trade will just expire, right? They're always drafting at like the 7th spot in the rookie draft every year, and just sort of just enough to be relatively competitive, but not really a threat, right? So that's what Green Bay is, man. Until they want to start making some moves. The thing is, though, if you make too aggressive of a move, you can find yourself dumping DJ Moore and way too many draft picks to trade up for a 5'8" quarterback just because he aced a test that no one even understands whether or not it's predictive or not, instead of just staying where you were and drafting Will Levis. Right? They could have done that, right? They could have just stayed where they were. The Carolina Panthers could just go to done what Green Bay does, just stay the course, draft the best quarterback available to you, and move on, instead of overthinking it and trading everything for an unprecedented number 1 overall quarterback, because he's even smaller than Baker Mayfield. And Baker Mayfield was a mistake to draft that guy 101. Drew Brees was the perfect pick. First pick in the 2nd round. You want to go with a 5'11" guy? Perfect, right? Once every decade. You want to burn a 2nd rounder on that guy? Take a chance. Throw some darts? Great. The 101? Get the hell out of here. You go C.J. Stroud at the 101. Or you go Anthony Richardson. Like you said, shoot for upside. But, so, yes, you should make moves when it makes sense. When those moves are available to you, your phone is always there and ready to be picked up, and you're ready to make a deal at any time, like Howie Roseman in Philadelphia. But some teams are just, we stay the course, we pick where we're drafting, and that's it.
That's why it doesn't work. I mean, like you said, it's the same team that's drafting in the same part of a dynasty draft every single year. They're just not willing to change, and that's probably what worries me.
Not even willing to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Like, hey, man, I tried to overpay for this guy's first rounder, but he said it's not available. What do you mean it's not available? Everyone needs to always be available.
Like, Romeo Doubs is not available for them. They're not trading
Romeo Doubs, yes.
For anything.
We're not dealing him. Aaron Jones? How is Aaron Jones still a Packer? What is this? This makes no sense.
Especially in the trade deadline, he should be the number 1 guy to be going for them right now.
What a waste. What an upgrade. He's the ultimate upgrade over Justice Hill in Baltimore. But no. It would be. It's just these trades make too much sense, Alex. Why would they do it? It makes too much sense.
Yeah.
Just
simple?
like, hey, we used an early 2nd rounder on DeAndre Swift, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to trade him for some 3rd rounder and not even a 4th rounder. And then we're going to use our 1st rounder to replace him with another running back like they did in Detroit. Like that, like the galaxy brains on some of these. It seems like NFL is either galaxy brained or just won't pick up the phone. Right? And then you have Howie Roseman and that's it. It's like, how is Howie Roseman, just playing this entire league like an instrument? It's because he's the only one that's not galaxy braining it, but he is picking up the phone. Right? That's pretty much it. So how do we navigate as fantasy gamers the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery situation, that backfield in Detroit? Because Montgomery's going to be back. And when he's back, he's the workhorse. But Gibbs was amazing when Montgomery was out. So what do you do?
I mean, I think that I would just be holding both right now. Because, I've always been a believer, even going into the season, that both could be really productive. I think the thing that, yes, last night we saw Jahmyr Gibbs see a career high in carries, but he also, over the last 2 weeks, has been really, really phenomenal in the passing game. And I think as far as fantasy goes, we haven't seen the step up that people were expecting from Jameson Williams, which would allow, Jahmyr Gibbs to probably be the 3rd target in this offense behind St. Brown and Sam LaPorta. But I think that both David Montgomery can be like the main rusher, but I think that Jahmyr Gibbs can be the more take 10 to 11 carries a game and see at least 5 or 6 targets a week. Like I think both can get 15 plus touches a game. That's more what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, because they don't have any weapons outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam LaPorta. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown, they have Sam LaPorta, and they have 2 great running backs. That's the offense, right?
It's like the Dolphins. I mean, the offense is just so condensed that it's great for fantasy. Like you don't need to have a third guy, or if more than that, you can have an offense that just runs through 3 or 4 people.
Yeah. So I expected Detroit, because they have that week 9 bye week, I expected Detroit to put David Montgomery on the IR. When they didn't, it told me, well, David Montgomery's coming back week 10. Like that, you can pencil that in. He probably could have came back this week, but they're like, no, we have the bye week coming up. We want him to be 100% healthy. So I'm expecting them to put Jahmyr Gibbs back in the bottle as a bell cow and to re-anoint David Montgomery as the workhorse, but to get Jahmyr Gibbs more involved. If you're expecting David Montgomery to have the same opportunity share in week 10 that he had early in the season, that's not going to happen. We've seen too much. Everyone has seen too much from Jahmyr Gibbs to believe that's going to happen. But if he gets, 5 less touches, given that he had these games with 3 touchdowns, of course you're going to be starting David Montgomery, and you're probably going to be very happy about it. But then those 5 touches going to Jahmyr Gibbs, he can do more with those touches, and then he wins too. There were seasons where you had Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, both fantasy relevant week in, week out in New Orleans, and I think that's the scenario we're going to see in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, even beyond that, I mean, last year, he wasn't great, but as far as fantasy points per game, DeAndre Swift was, I think, the running back 17 in fantasy points per game, with Jamal Williams finishing as a running back 1. So, like, in last year as a total, if you just look at teams' expected fantasy points per game, the Lions were second. I mean, among every NFL team. So they used their running backs and got them as involved as any team. So, like, when you made that comparison, the Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, like this team does utilize running backs more than anybody else. They already did that last year. They're number 2. Like, why can't they just be number 1 and get both these guys more involved? I think the people that are acting like that, it's only going to be one guy, is just crazy to me.
I mean, I could have said that, Alex, but I try to be creative. I try to look back through history, try to find other comps other than the same exact team. Yes, your comparison is better because it's the same team. So, of course, that's a great point, but it goes beyond just 2022 Detroit Lions. We have other examples of this, and what is the common thread across these teams? Pocket passers, right? Above average offensive line, great protection, pocket passers, distributing the ball, short and intermediate quadrants. That's Drew Brees. That's Jared Goff now. But again, your example was the same team with the same guys, most of the same guys. So yes, more relevant. You win the relevance war on that. I just like to be interesting also. What is up with Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor? At this point, it's becoming comical.
Is it because of injuries, though? Like, it seemed like Jonathan Taylor, this was finally going to be the week, and then Jonathan Taylor got hurt in the second half, and then it was like the Zach Moss show after that. I think he only had 2 touches in the second half after he got hurt. So I thought that last week, like, I think it took a little bit too long for a ramp up for me. I would have liked it to happen earlier, but it was happening last week before the injury. So I think it's more of a bad timing thing. But if Jonathan Taylor, similar to last year, got banged up and couldn't carry the full workload again, then maybe Zach Moss can find a way to just continue to be relevant. So
is Jonathan Taylor going to play this week?
It's a good question. I don't know.
We don't know. But there were a couple bad luck games where you had Kenneth Walker. Did he re-injure his, what was it, a calf?
Yeah, his calf injury.
So do you think that was what contributed to his low snap count?
I thought it did until you listen to, Pete Carroll is the most unreliable coach in the NFL, but if you listen to his post-game press conference, I mean, he sounded like he really wanted to get Zach Charbonnet more involved, which made no sense compared to what Kenneth Walker has been producing so far. But if you listen to that press conference, I mean, it sounded like he was pounding the drum like nonstop on Zach Charbonnet and was like, Kenneth Walker wasn't that relevant anymore all of a sudden.
Well, I don't believe anything he says.
I don't either.
So he's so full of it, but it is interesting. He's why, Zach Charbonnet, my number one waiver claim of the week, just based on the fact that Kenneth Walker, not 100%, and the coaches like Charbonnet. I mean, he can be lying and still telling the truth, right? Even when I lie, I tell the truth. I think someone said that once. It was a great line.
It's a great line.
I tell the truth. I tell the truth even when I lie. I think that's Pete Carroll right there. Yep. Pete Carroll tells the truth even when he lies. All that we care about really is that we know that they like Zach Charbonnet, and we know that a calf injury is bad news. Calf injury is usually 2 to 3 weeks. The guy is not 100%. Calf injury, groin injury, they're very similar. They're on two different ends of the leg, but they have this very similar recovery timetable, and they have a similar effect on fantasy production. So you're required to go get Zach Charbonnet. You're required to go reacquire Zach Moss if he was dropped, which I'm sure he wasn't. But I mean, yeah, Zach Moss. Jonathan Taylor looked great in the first half, gave you a 40-yard run, but then so did Zach Moss in the second half. Right? So what Zach Moss is doing, because he's a slug, okay, he's been kicked around the league, and Jonathan Taylor is one of the great All-American running backs of all time. I mean, who else has multiple 2,000-yard rushing seasons in college? And then week after week after week, these guys post similar numbers with similar opportunities. And it really needs to be, a general manager needs to be forced to sit down and watch the Colts in 2023 before they're allowed to draft a running back in the NFL draft. Like the top equity holders, whether it's a town or whether it's a person, need to get together and say, hey, general manager, you want to draft a running back? You have to watch Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor, knowing who they are. Go to their player profiler pages, okay, playerprofiler.com, check them out. Then watch the games in 2023 before you even think about pushing the button on a goddamn running back, especially in the first round. Get out of here.
You see it every year. I mean, the guys that take over. I mean, you remember even a year or two ago when Christian McCaffrey got hurt and Mike Davis took over. I mean, Mike Davis was a perfect example of somebody like Zach. He's like just an older, heavier Zach Moss that just gets stuff done for absolutely not the highest salary in the world at all.
But Zach Moss is hilarious because what builds up on a rock that doesn't move?
Moss.
Right? Like, you can't make this up, dude. You can't make this up. Mike Davis has the most generic name, right? In the name dictionary, and Zach Moss is literally like the personification of a slow moving object, and yet still, all-time All-American hero Jonathan Taylor can't be more efficient than this guy. You can't make it. It's the perfect case study. I'm so happy we have it. And then meanwhile, like we have a guy that, he's out of the league, he's in the league, he's back in the league, Darrell Henderson. I thought for sure that Darrell Henderson would lead my waiver wire show that I do earlier in the day on Tuesdays. And I look up and he's more than 50% rostered. Like, that's what the running back thirst is like. People are so desperate. I had no idea. People are so desperate for running back help that they like more than 50% of league. They went out and they were like, we got to get this Darrell Henderson guy, right? It's the Rams offense. They have a bad run blocking offensive line. He's splitting touches evenly with Royce Freeman. Don't care. We're going to get this guy. Right? And then he bailed you out with 11 fantasy points. So I say just keep streaming him. What do you think?
You have to. I mean, that's the name of the game. It's just like, I think that NFL GMs need to be a lot more like fantasy managers when it comes to running backs. Rather than having to go get the best guy, I think you can win a lot with guys that are low price. You can win with the Darrell Hendersons and the Mike Davises of the world, like rather than having, maybe not to that level, but you can win with a lot of these like really mid-tier running backs. And I think that GMs could take a step from fantasy managers on that. But again, like you said, the running back craze is always going to be there for NFL GMs and for fantasy managers, always willing to draft above or do whatever it takes to go get some of these guys the second they see something.
We got news. We got no trade deadline news. Our Detroit Lions have acquired Donovan Peoples-Jones, the local boy, the Michigan product from the Cleveland Browns. He's now a Detroit Lion. Massive, dare I say, massive upgrade over the epic bust that is Jameson Williams. They needed a real field stretcher that they could rely on to squeeze the football, that would run the right routes, that actually cared about the sport of football. They got one in Donovan Peoples-Jones. He also can play special teams. Great acquisition. Great. Wow, what a move. Interesting.
Super interesting. It says a lot about what's going on, behind closed doors there, especially after Jameson Williams dropped an absolute donut last night. I mean, that tells you all you need to know. Yeah.
Awful. Yeah, awful. And this is a player I want. Go get him. Go pick him up. Unfortunately, based on the timing, the trade deadline is happening just before waivers run. So those of us that are paying close attention to news, we can't just run out and pick up Donovan Peoples-Jones. We have to wait for everyone else to get the news. And then everyone knows, okay, this guy's going to be what you were getting from Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds was the perfect streaming play in flex or in the wide receiver 3 spot all year, or at least for the first 6 weeks. When Amon-Ra was in and out of the lineup, it was all about Josh Reynolds. He was the most reliable streaming wide receiver in the NFL. And now you have a guy that's more explosive, who is going to be taking that field stretch plus role. I love it. And he is the perfect complement. Him down the field with Amon-Ra in the short intermediate quadrants. I love this talent configuration. They can still put Jameson Williams out there for a handful of snaps just to keep the defense honest or whatever they do. They can have Josh Reynolds there and Khalif Raymond there as just, pieces for 3 receiver sets to rotate through. That's all great. But Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to have an 80% snap share. He's going to be out there. This guy can block. This guy's a great football player. There's no one ahead of him on the depth chart in Detroit that can challenge him in terms of skill set and to play that X receiver role, because you want Amon-Ra at Z. That's his ideal position. And Donovan Peoples-Jones, just the perfect X receiver to get at value for like a late pick from the Cleveland Browns. I'm interested to see what they gave up to get him.
6th round pick. That's all it was.
Just a 6th round pick.
Yeah.
Just a 6th round pick. Now I said late round pick. I didn't think it was going to be as late as a 6th rounder. That was where he was drafted. He was 6th round draft pick originally. And man, I thought Donovan Peoples-Jones has done enough in the league that he would have commanded more than that in trade, especially because he's good on special teams. Woo.
Yeah.
Great trade.
Would you take
Great
him
trade,
now,
man.
If you were in like a managed redraft league, would you take him as a waiver pickup right now or Leonard Fournette?
Oh.
For the rest of the season? I don't think it's a question. Leonard Fournette is probably like my number 1 waiver pickup right now.
I think Fournette Fournette and Charbonnet, I think, are like a 1A, 1B on waivers this week.
I agree with that.
And then it's a question below them. It's always
Yes.
pretty much every week there's going to be a couple running backs that need to be above everybody else. And we actually had Darrell Henderson as one of those guys in previous weeks. And then there's so many wide receivers that are typically available that you're going to get similar production from a Michael Wilson. So my argument to never spending up on wide receiver on the waiver wire is that there's always another guy. There's always a Jaden Reed. There's always a Josh Downs. And then those guys are available for a couple weeks. We have them featured on the waiver wired program. And then it's weeks before they get to a 50% rostered threshold. So there's no rush. Where a guy like Darrell Henderson, it's like instant. He's not available. If you don't get him the week he's available, he's not going to be available. Leonard Fournette, you better get him this week or he's not going to be available.
Completely. It's gonna be really soon, really fast, and that's where the scarcity can come in on that. Where I think that Peoples-Jones will probably be on the waiver wire, similar to a Josh Downs or Michael Wilson, until he starts producing. Where they're not going to be grabbing him in anticipation. Like running backs are all about the anticipation of the following week, where wide receivers on the waiver wire are more like, let's see the production first, and just because they're getting snaps does not mean where they're going to pick them up.
And that's true. And the other thing you always have to remember on the waiver wire is that most of your league is not watching the Mind of Mansion show. Most of the league is not a patron of the Podfather. Patreon.com/Podfather. Most of them not listening to the Alex Caruso podcast on the 33rd team. Right? Most of these people are just flipping through some very high-level articles and news. If they're even doing that, they're just going to the waiver wire, they're sorting by fantasy points, and they're making some very quick decisions. They're not digging deep. They have no idea who Donovan Peoples-Jones is and what his true potential is in Detroit, like we know, right? So stop giving your league mates so much credit, okay? Know what they know and know what they don't know. They don't know what we know about Donovan Peoples-Jones, but they have heard of Leonard Fournette, and they are going to want him, and you should also want him. So in a competition for acquisition of players, use your capital wisely and put it down on Fournette. Fournette is very interesting in that we know he's better than Latavius Murray because Latavius Murray hasn't shown anything in the last few weeks. He had an opportunity, didn't flash. Fournette is an excellent receiver out of the backfield, and the only reason he was relegated last year is because Rachaad White's an even better receiver. But there's no one that's his level of receiver out of the backfield in Buffalo, right? I think James Cook is an underrated runner and an overrated receiver, whereas Leonard Fournette is an overrated runner and an underrated receiver. And on this offense, you just want pieces, right? You want Khalil Shakir. You want Gabriel Davis. You want Leonard Fournette. Of course, you want Dalton Kincaid. I don't care who it is. You want him. Like, I'm talent agnostic when it comes to the number 2 receiver on Buffalo. I know that Gabriel Davis isn't good. I don't care. I'm trading for him after 2 back-to-back dud weeks, and I'm continuing to flex him because I want those ceiling performances. 3 touchdowns in any given week is possible for Gabriel Davis, and it's not possible for most other receivers. It is possible for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Donovan Peoples-Jones is now one of those Gabriel Davis-type players, but you don't need to give your league mates the credit that they know that.
Can he still be that guy, though, as the 4th option in that offense? Because it's easily going to be St. Brown, LaPorta, and Gibbs. Like, if I agree with you for what they need as an NFL team, but as far as fantasy football, where is his upside if at best he's only going to be the 4th option in this offense if everyone's healthy?
He's 6'4", and he runs a 4.4 flat.
I mean,
the guy has one of the highest burst scores in the player profiler database. The guy's also, he has incredible instincts and spatial awareness to be a punt returner, kick returner. So yeah, he can go up and get it in the back of the end zone on 3rd and 10. He can also break loose on like a post corner route. There's all kinds of ways Donovan Peoples-Jones can beat you. He can go out for 4 catches, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That is very much a stat line that both Gabriel Davis and Donovan Peoples-Jones can deliver. And we talked about it. There's only one other receiver that should be commanding any kind of targets. The other receivers are running backs and tight ends, and we know this is an offense that wants to throw the ball. I give Brad Holmes a lot of credit for doing this trade. It's a great trade. Peoples-Jones is worth more than a 6th rounder. And he's also helped to push down the chain this idea that, hey, the passing game is more efficient and we need to be a pass-first team. And yes, I believe Dan Campbell has been empowered and he has more decision-making than I would like, especially in the first round of the NFL draft. That was shameful what they did, going with a running back and a middle linebacker, but I blame Dan Campbell, and I'm giving all the credit to Brad Holmes for this trade.
Yeah, he probably deserves it. I mean, he definitely deserves it here. I think that's a perfect move for what their team needs. I mean, but like I think one of the things that we mentioned earlier that's probably the most important part is it's not the take lock where they feel like, yes, I just drafted Jameson Williams, but we can't trade for Donovan Peoples-Jones because we can't have that be a bad look for us. I mean, I commend him on adapting a year and a month later to be willing to go trade for someone that's actually going to help the football team.
And I will say it's unfair to hold what DeAndre Swift is doing in Philadelphia against Brad Holmes. DeAndre Swift didn't want to be in Detroit. Yeah. So it's sort of a false premise to wave that around, because had DeAndre Swift been in Detroit, he would have been sulking on the sidelines. He would not have been buying into the culture like he has been in Philadelphia. Philadelphia was able to get through to him. That's where he's from. That's where he wanted to be. And he's a different player there than he was in Detroit. So, again, it's total false comparison. They did what they had to do. They could have just rolled with David Montgomery, though. They didn't have to use a first-round pick. God damn it. I can't just give credit for a great trade. I have to always remind Brad Holmes that he drafted a running back in the first round, and that is a cardinal sin. The Jaguars drafted a running back in the first round. It was also a mistake, but it's been a great benefit to fantasy gamers. I know that Josh Larkey was incredibly bullish on Travis Etienne, so he's your teammate over at the 33rd team. I say that Travis Etienne is going to lead the league in rushing. He's a league winner for fantasy. Are you overexposed to Travis Etienne, or were you fading him?
I was fading him a little bit. Well, I wasn't fading him. I was just a little bit behind where the market was, where I saw one of two things happening, where it was one, this, or two, you read in between the lines and they draft a running back in the 3rd round, and that says to me that maybe they're not as bought into him as we thought. I think that was the thing, is where like last year we saw him get banged up towards the end of the season. They go out and draft a running back in the 3rd round. It was more of a compliment, but my thought was that maybe they don't believe in him. So I was definitely wrong there, but I felt the same way about Zack Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, where you don't draft a running back in the 2nd round when you're trying to contend if your running backs that you have are that good. It was the same process with Etienne, where the Jaguars could contend this year. So like, why draft a running back that early?
You're giving these front offices too much credit. What's happening is that they just feel like they need depth, and they don't view a 2nd rounder and a 3rd rounder as valuable as we do. And they're just like, hey, we know we need running backs on our roster, and my scouting department likes these running backs, and we're just going to draft them. That's not a signal that we're out on Walker or we're out on Etienne. Yeah. That you have to always remember that these are basic people, and they're not special in terms of their ability to evaluate. Yes, there's a couple guys that I think are above average. Chris Ballard had an incredible draft in 2023. Howie Roseman's been next level. Most of them are just trying to fill out the roster. That's really what's happening, and reading into it more than that is overthinking it. That's what happens, and that's a lesson for us. That's a lesson for us. And in the future, we're not going to be, pushing Kenneth Walker down as much. That's not going to happen if once you've processed that lesson. Same thing with the Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne, though, that was a classic zoom out where I was like, I know this guy's a good receiver, and I know that it was a total outlier and just pure variance that he didn't have a game with more than 3 catches. That's just how football is. Football, just sometimes, you have bad matchups for running backs out of the backfield, and those matchups stack up, and before you know it, the season's over, and you don't have a big receiving performance on your resume yet. Oh well, does that nullify everything you did at Clemson? No. That was my attitude with Travis Etienne. Rachaad White is actually a better receiver than Travis Etienne. It's very difficult to find a running back who is a better receiver than Rachaad White. To me, he looks like a receiver playing running back, and that's good and bad. To me, the fact that he is so receiver-like out of the backfield is excellent for fantasy because he has this 10-point floor. But it means he's less effective as a runner, and my worry is that in the long run, NFL teams won't view him as anything more than a satellite back. He could get Antonio Gibson. That's my fear with a guy like Rachaad White when he's too receiver-ish.
Yeah, I agree. I think this year's a perfect storm because all they have behind him is, like Keyshawn Vaughn and Chase Edmonds. But I do think like the future. I mean, I was all over him this year because of the lack of competition, the coach speak, how they talk about him. But like if Leonard Fournette was still there, like you couldn't, because Leonard Fournette is, I mean, he's not a great runner, but like neither is Rachaad White, where they have just the most incompetent backfield that you could possibly have in the NFL, which is I think why he can be really effective this year in the run game as far as like getting the lion's share of the volume. Whether he's efficient or not, it's just not going to go away, because anytime that Sean Tucker or Keyshawn Vaughn has come in, it hasn't been any better at all than Rachaad White.
No, they're not. Yeah, they're not. He's not a great runner, but he's still the best of what they have, and he is legitimately a top 5 receiving running back in the league.
Yep.
That's not up for dispute, and he could perform well. Like this week against the Texans, they go to I know it's a road game, but he's got the Texans this week. Rachaad White is kind of on a roll, and I don't see that waning until they unfortunately the following week, week 10, it's a home game. At least it's a home game, but it is the Titans, and the Titans are very difficult to run against. So that's a bummer that they're going to face the Titans in week 10. But at least we have week 9 coming up with Rachaad White, and then we can look back and be like, hey, this guy put together 3 straight quality fantasy performances. Everyone needs to go back and reevaluate this guy. And it's pretty easy, though, because we play in something called a PPR league, and it's so obvious to everybody that this is one of the smoothest receivers we've seen out of the backfield in a long time.
Yeah, and given their offensive line and the state of their offense, I mean, you've seen it. He's had 2 matchups so far where he wasn't playing like a top 10 defense. It's not like it's only when he's playing the Texans or the Broncos that he's been really good. It's just as long as he's not playing a top 10 defense, he's been good, but he's only had 2 good matchups all season. But he's averaging 19 fantasy points over those 2 matchups. He had 17 and 21. I mean, that 19 is the running back 6 overall pace. Granted, 2-game sample size, but like all he's had is just horrible beyond horrible matchups playing each of the top 5 run defenses in fantasy so far.
And it's not getting much better. Titans week 10, 49ers week 11. Fuck that, man. God damn it.
Yeah, schedule gods did not do him. Why can't he have Ramondre Stevenson schedule? He doesn't have a top 10 defense for the rest of the year. Just put him, like, just switch schedules, please.
They got week 12 against the Colts. So there's some perfectly fine matchups coming up. But unfortunately, the schedule has been tilted against Rachaad White. Anyone that jumped to conclusions, this guy's bad, this was a bad pick. Isn't he an RB2 in fantasy at this point?
He's the running back 22. That is higher than he was being drafted.
Eat it! Eat it! Just eat it. Baker Mayfield also. Not bad. Not bad.
Way better than expected.
Way better.
Yeah.
It's almost like his receivers are Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Rachaad White.
It's hard not to. It's not hard not to do well when you got those guys, But still, but like it's not to the Geno Smith comeback player of the year level, but like an off-brand what we saw last year of Geno Smith, I think is pretty fair. Where he's still got two guys that are probably mid-tier wide receiver twos at this point, and you have a top 5 pass catching running back in the league. I mean, like you could compare to him to like a more dangerous Brock Purdy. You know what I mean? Where he has these like uber talented weapons that in turn kind of help lift him up for fantasy, regardless of who he is at a quarterback at this point in his career.
Okay, so this week streaming, we've got Titans at Steelers for Will Levis, Thursday Night Football. We've got the Buccaneers at the Texans, right? The game total on Bucs-Texans is 40. The game total on Titans-Steelers is 36.5. The Steelers are 3-point favorites, so there's... it's like 16 implied points for the Titans. So just looking at implied points, you would stream Mayfield, but are you just going right back to Will Levis anyway, or you want to go Mayfield?
It's hard not to. It's hard not to after he put up 27 fantasy points last week. I think that I would have to like be a smarter fantasy manager and just take Baker Mayfield this week because they don't have a 16-point implied total. But I think this is what we talked about at the beginning, where it's the whole the Bryce Young factor, where people just want arm talent and visual upside, which is what you get this week with Will Levis compared to a Baker Mayfield.
Short week. We're going Levis, man. We're going Levis. Levis is not the data-driven approach to streaming, but it is what feels good.
Yep.
Right? It's what feels good. Sam Howell, right? That's a 40-point total too, and they're going at New England. So if there was a week to not stream Sam Howell and to stream someone else like a Mayfield or a Will Levis, this would be the week. Jahan Dotson last week. Where did that come from?
I have no idea. I don't think it's out of nowhere, because I think there were a lot of people that were in on him. I was starting to buy in on him, and I was definitely overexposed and paid the price. But there was this like thought among people that were saying that maybe Sam Howell is going to be a thing this year, and it didn't happen for the first couple weeks. But I mean, Jahan Dotson had 10 and 8 targets. He was an elite target earner last year. He hasn't been at this point this year, but this is the same Jahan Dotson we saw flashes of at the end of his rookie year when he was playing.
It's a target squeeze, right? He's not going to be the number one. It's going to be McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel is one of the most versatile wide receivers in the league. You've got Antonio Gibson out of the backfield. It's just unfortunate that Jahan Dotson isn't special enough to rise above that. Fortunately for him, and fortunately for Sam Howell, Washington has one of the worst secondaries in the league, and they're going to be throwing the ball all year. And so that's a great benefit. Dak Prescott, on the other hand, isn't going to be blowing out teams every week. Dak Prescott was dropped in a bunch of leagues, understandably, and then they rebooted him. But it also was a reminder that the Rams really hadn't played anybody this year. And now they're starting to play good teams, right? The mid part of the season, they started to play some better teams. And what's happening? They're getting crushed. And Dak's going, 25 of 31, 4 touchdowns, running a few times, ran for 20 yards. But we know they're going to be winning a lot of games, turning the ball over to the run game. Where are you with Dak for the rest of the season?
I don't think my opinions change that much, where like I don't think to me he's going to be more than a streamer.
Right.
I mean, we're going to it's Dak, what they've been under Mike McCarthy, at least for the most part, has just been like especially without Kellen Moore this year, has been there's good weeks and there's bad weeks. And it's that simple, and it's not something I want for fantasy football, where you don't ever know whether Dak's going to drop a goose egg each week or he's going to put up 30 points. There's just not a lot of in between with them in the way that their offense is structured. So for him, I would be streaming him in the right matchups, but otherwise, I still don't want him after this week. I'm not rushing to the waiver wire because I don't think that he's really changed. Their offense is that much different than it's going to be for the rest of the year.
21 implied points at Philadelphia this week. Great game, by the way. Incredible game. Cowboys, Eagles. This could be a shootout, but the game total suggests otherwise. It's one of those things where I was expecting, right? I was expecting like 49, 50-point total, given that it was Dak against Hurts, given the weaponry, Lamb, A.J. Brown. These games, typically, that's a 50-point total, right? Look at all the games with the Chiefs and the Dolphins. 50.5, right? 46. That's the game total. And so that to me is like a warning shot that on the road, Dak against a tough defense, I would love to think they're going to turn into comeback mode, but Dak has had so many games where he's just not good, right? He's just not accurate pushing the ball down the field or refuses to push the ball down the field. So it makes it difficult to push the button on a guy like Dak. But you'd still rather stream him over like a Mayfield.
Yeah, I'd be starting him over Mayfield all day. It's the same thing with Will Levis. What would make you feel good? Starting Dak or Baker Mayfield? I still think that Dak is the better play, but there's at least a little bit more trust level that he's done it from a fantasy football perspective, where Baker Mayfield really never has over any full season, no matter how far long ago.
So what do we think? Would you start Dak or like a Derek Carr?
Oh, man. I mean,
that's
Derek
where
Carr's
he is, right?
Derek.
Dak is now in that Derek Carr zone.
He's in the exact Derek Carr zone. I think I'd have to go with Dak this week, at least, after what Sam Howell just did to the Eagles. And I don't think that Dak is that far above or below Sam Howell at this point. And I think that they're going to be in comeback mode because I think that the Eagles can roll them this week. So I think that I would start Dak over Derek Carr. But the fact that this is a conversation should tell you all you need to know about Dak, that we're having a Derek Carr versus Prescott conversation.
It's also unfair to Dak because the Saints have the Bears at home.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, 24 implied points for the Saints versus 21 or 22 for the Cowboys. So the Saints have more implied points, but the running game has been accounting for a greater share of the fantasy scoring in New Orleans. So it's a wash. It's actually a wash between those two guys.
Yeah.
Home against the Bears. I trust Carr, now healthy, and pushing the ball downfield, taking advantage of the weapons that he has, especially Rashid Shaheed finally being able to connect down the field with the AC joint, getting closer to 100%. I think there's a higher floor and a higher ceiling for Carr this week than Dak, unfortunately. Tony Pollard has been the most disappointing player in all of fantasy. If you just healthy, right? Can you think of a more disappointing, healthy fantasy player than Tony Pollard this year?
There is not one, and it's not even close at this point, especially for you because he was supposed to be the next Austin Eckler. We've been waiting for this breakout. We've been talking about the what if no Zeke for what feels like half a decade now.
Oh, remember what if no Zeke?
Yeah. I mean, what if no Zeke was there was protests outside local libraries around where I live about no Zeke and give Pollard a chance. And, we got that, and look what happened.
Look what happened. Now they get the Eagles, right? So it's just not even – it's just when he's going to have a week, man. He's going to have a week. You can look at the schedule, try to figure out what week that's going to be. Cowboys have the Giants at home in week 10. I mean, that's the week to circle. If it doesn't happen for Pollard in week 10, and unfortunately the Cowboys are facing an Eagles defense, are facing a Giants defense that has been one of the better defenses in the league the last 4 weeks, right? So, oh man, I'm begging, I'm pleading with the football gods, make it happen, make it so week 10 for Tony Pollard, please. I'm still knowing that we have that home game against the Giants coming up week 10. I'm trading for Pollard just based on that information. Fuck it, I'm trading for Pollard. I'm doing it. I want him. I'm leaning into the variance. Give me Pollard. He's healthy. He's great. We know he's an Eckler level talent. Give him to me.
It's only a matter of time, especially with similar to Rachaad White, just the running back. It's Rico Dowdle. I mean, come on. Like Rico Dowdle is in that backfield, and this offense has had some decent performances. Like the fact that we didn't get a Pollard explosion game even in the last week. I know it was a CeeDee Lamb week. Like when their offense was rolling, we still didn't see him on the level that he should have been given where he's drafted.
Trade for him. Trade for him now. Because no one has high expectations for him against the Eagles, right? If he outperforms and has a boom week against the Eagles, then you're never going to get him. So you might as well do it now. Did you happen to trade Raheem Mostert in October at any point? Did you have Raheem Mostert and able to trade him?
I did in one redraft league. I traded him. Right. Well, this is the week before Devon Achane got hurt. But right before Devon Achane got hurt, I traded him straight up for Garrett Wilson at the time.
Woo, 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 woo. There you go. That's all. Lean into it.
Hasn't totally worked out, but it was just like, okay, season long, we're here to win championships. Like, what's going to happen week 17, week 17, week 17? I felt like that more likely than not, Garrett Wilson's probably going to be the guy rather than the 30-year-old running back, as much as Raheem Mostert's been phenomenal.
Love the logic. Great move. Great process there. Darrell Henderson outproduced him, right? Darrell Henderson outproduced Mostert last week. So that's all that really matters, right? Like the trade-off wasn't that great. And is it possible that Aaron Rodgers returns? I keep seeing Aaron Rodgers taking snaps and throwing the ball around. We've seen like Terrell Suggs came back from an Achilles tear the same season. It's not unprecedented.
It's not. So why couldn't it happen now?
I think it could. I think that all the more reason to try to acquire Garrett Wilson in seasonal leagues as well as a Tony Pollard. These are two guys that were drafted in the second round, and their trade value has sunk since then, and now would be the time. Now would be the time to grab them. And I'm willing to go and trade for anybody. Like I talked about trading for Gabriel Davis, right? Knowing these spike weeks were coming, right? You know the spike weeks are coming, and I don't care if the guy's not that good. Like I love putting best ball receivers in my flex spot, like my second flex spot, my third receiver spot. I'm happy to put best ball receivers. I prefer to put best ball receivers. That's why I'm picking up and playing a Rashid Shaheed. That's why I'm going to be picking up and playing a Donovan Peoples-Jones. These are guys I love to play in flex because, yeah, if they dud out, you can still win. But when they go boom, they really help you win that week.
That's what we're looking for. I mean, just the boom is everything. And I mean, I'm a little bit probably too just live or die when it comes. Like I think that I try to think of things as black and white, as either there is upside or there isn't. Like, yes, there are the weekly pockets of gray that are Darrell Henderson that can help get me through a bye week. But like ultimately, like it is black and white. Is Raheem Mostert going to be there come week 17 or is he not? Is Garrett Wilson going to be there week 17 to win me a championship or is he not? And that's how, at the end of the day, if you're trying to win it all, like that's always where my heart is going to go, whether it's correct or not.
Your heart and your head. That's also a smart move. That's the best. When something's in your heart and it's also the smart move, that's the best. That's absolutely the best. Would you agree that Gabriel Davis is the most best ball receiver ever?
It's the Hall of Fame of best ball. It only has two members. It is Will Fuller and Gabriel Davis. There's no one else that should be inducted in that class except those two guys.
Nobody else. And so, again, Gabriel Davis, not that good, right? He's better than Romeo Doubs, but still, he doesn't deserve to be a long-term number 2 with Josh Allen. He doesn't deserve to be across from Stephon Diggs longer term. Stephon Diggs deserves an upgrade as his number 2 teammate. Right? But he's what we have, right? And for that reason, he has 2-3 touchdowns in his range of outcomes any given week. This is why I am perfectly fine picking up Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston is not good. Quentin Johnston is definitively bad. But Josh Palmer is not right. He was a game-time decision with a knee and ankle, and then he goes out with a knee and ankle. And anytime it's like the entire lower leg, they can't even pinpoint what's wrong with him. Everything has just been twisted and gnarled in the lower leg. And it's like, oh, was it an ankle? No, it was a knee. Oh, was it a knee? Oh, no, it was an ankle. Right? What's keeping him out? Oh, combination of these things. That tells me, especially if he's going to go out and then try to come back and then go to the locker room and go to the tent and then come back, game time decision, I got to get Quentin Johnston. If there's a possibility he's the number 2 tethered to Justin Herbert, at that point, I don't care about talent.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to look at it. Especially, again, it's the same silly theme of just like the chasing upside, because all of a sudden next week Quentin Johnston plays 100% of the snaps with Justin Herbert as the clear number 2 wide receiver in this offense. That's not Austin Eckler. Like that's exactly what we're looking for. He's been bad, but like that's the kind of role that we're looking for, is someone that was just drafted in the first round. We saw nothing from in the first half. In the second,
he's bad. Yeah. It's also the Jets, right? It's also the Jets. But what if, Sauce Gardner locks up with the Keenan Allen? Stranger things, man.
Yeah, it's not. But even if it's not this week, if Josh Palmer is pretty much cooked for the season, I think that there is value to be had, as whether it was Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, like those guys have all, like whoever the number 2 wide receiver has been for the Chargers has been good all the way since like Tyrell Williams. If you go back 5 or 10 years.
Week 10 against the Lions, the Chargers have 25 implied points.
Wow.
That's what you're looking for. You're picking up Quentin Johnston this week. So when he goes out and gets 9 targets and is inefficient against the Jets, you have him stashed. You're not competing for him on the waiver wire the following week, knowing that I plan to play him in week 10 against the Lions. That's the move, because this Josh Palmer lower leg disaster could be a multi-week injury. Lower leg, gnarled, twisted, sprained thing. I feel bad, man. Josh Palmer had it. This poor guy has a 100-yard game, looked great, and he had other big plays called back with penalties. He's been a bad luck player this year, and then as soon as things are clicking into place for him, his ankle, knee gives out. It's just the NFL, man, NFL. Meanwhile, a guy like Michael Pittman, I don't think he's missed a game. Michael Pittman's a metronome, man. I think he's the most underrated wide receiver in the league.
Wow. Number 1.
All he does is command targets. I keep hearing that the ability to command targets is a skill. Every time I look up, Michael Pittman has 10 targets. When he was playing with a quarterback that was a low-volume, mobile-first quarterback, okay, right? He's still getting it done. Right? He's getting there. He's still giving you fantasy point scoring in the teens. Then they inject Gardner Minshew, and then boom, the guy is like 10 plus targets a game, 15 fantasy points plus a game. What more do you want?
It's really interesting that, to me, he's like slowly turning into the 6'4" super muscular version of Deontay Johnson, where like I think that he could be someone that even next year like continue to gets doubted upon because of the quarterback play, but no matter what, just continues to be an elite target earner week after week.
Yeah, 6'4" Deontay Johnson sounds amazing to me.
That sounds
like amazing. Guy had 13 targets last week, 18 fantasy points. Was he efficient? No, only 40 yards on 13 targets. That's not efficient. But he was going up against like a Marshawn Lattimore, like a proper alpha corner. So and then in those games, yes, Josh Downs is going to outproduce him, right? That's a week that Alec Pierce could produce, but still Pittman gets there regardless. He finds ways to get there every week. That's why he's underrated. And I think there's a boom week coming, by the way, for Chris Olave. If you follow the targets, Olave had 9 targets. He was the target leader, but he wasn't efficient. Boom week coming. I mean, I know it's the Bears, so it's so obvious that there's a boom week coming for Chris Olave. But this is like, when I look at this week, I'm like, oh, this is like everyone will be playing Chris Olave in DFS this week.
Yeah, especially after every game this season, he's had at least 9 targets outside of the Derek Carr injury game, where he was not throwing the ball 5 yards downfield in a 30-point blowout against the Patriots. I mean, every other game he has at least 9 targets. I mean, he's like, and he also, I think he's number 2 right now in the NFL in air yards, behind only AJ Brown. I mean, like every guy in the top 5 of air yards right now is a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy, except for Chris Olave.
I take it all back. Michael Pittman is not the most underrated wide receiver. It's Chris Olave.
Let's go. I'm with that.
And would you agree that Devontae Smith's underrated?
Yeah, I think that a lot of like the last couple weeks going to get overlooked just because of how quickly like people are going to flip. Like the first, like, do you remember like the first 2 weeks of the season when AJ Brown hadn't broken out and everyone was like, "What if Devontae Smith is just like actually just as good as AJ Brown?"
I was hearing that last year too.
Yeah,
right. And then I was also hearing that this guy was an incredible college receiver because he, I don't know, won the Heisman. Maybe he's just good, Alex.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus Christ.
Same thing with Olave. After a couple bad games, people are pretty quick to be falling off. And, man, it's not like Dallas Goedert's taken over. It is literally just one guy that's had a streak of really big games.
Calvin Ridley, though, not overrated. He's sorry, excuse me. Jesus, I fucked it up. God, I hate myself. Oh my God, I was having such a good show. Oh no. Oh, embarrassing. So Calvin Ridley, not underrated. One of the most overrated wide receivers in my lifetime. I think he's been overrated his entire career, going all the way back to college, because he went to Alabama, right? And now he's been, resuscitated once again. You know, he had a nice little game last week. Great, good for you. Fine, solid. But he's a bust. And who would you, other than Calvin Ridley, give me a couple more wide receivers, like your top 3 wide receiver busts of the year. Who would you consider to be those players?
I think number 1, probably, I mean, it's just like not fair, but it's got to be Cooper Kupp because of the expectations and because of the second he came back even this year, he looked really good. And then the last couple weeks has not been as amazing. I think that's like the more in-season disappointment. I think T. Higgins and like the failure of this Bengals offense up until last week is got to hurt, especially for like the ascension that we've seen from T. Higgins over the last couple years. And I think the last guy that has to be mentioned is not really a bust, but Justin Jefferson seemed like the most unbreakable, sure thing that we've ever seen in fantasy football. He's not a running back. He's not going to get hurt after a lot of touches. He is the, golden boy of fantasy football, breaking every record known to mankind. And then the curse of the number 1 pick, can't even be survived by Justin Jefferson.
That's true. Yeah, it was the number 1 pick curse, right? Now, I didn't have him as my number 1 receiver. I had Ja'Marr Chase, right? But, I'm not going to victory lap on a guy getting injured, right? Ja'Marr Chase could very easily finish as the number 1 receiver in fantasy and surpass Tyreek Hill. I think we're all seeing that that's very much a possibility. I think the most disappointing wide receivers, the biggest busts, are number 1, T. Higgins. I think that's a smash. T. Higgins, Cooper Kupp with the hamstring injury, and then he did have some big weeks coming back. I'm going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt. Then I got Calvin Ridley. And now see, if we're allowing ourselves to include injuries as part of the disappointment. I think they can't be the whole reason. Like with Justin Jefferson is pretty much the whole reason because he was one of the best. He was the number one fantasy receiver before going down. It's got to be Christian Watson. I mean,
oh man,
Christian Watson was a 4th rounder, and in the NFFC and some of these you start 3 receiver leagues, he was a 3rd round pick. The hope around Christian Watson was incredible. After 1 month, he had 1 good month. And I was embarrassed to even mention it because I felt like that get off my lawn guy. You know, I always feel like the oldest, crustiest dude when I'm asking something simple like, can you give us more than 1 good month before I launch you into the 3rd round? Right? Or in those same leagues, Calvin Ridley was a 2nd rounder. And I said, can I at least see this guy play football in the last 18 months to launch him into the 2nd round? Is that too much to ask? Like, yeah, but that's basic thinking, right? And I'm like, well, that's basic thinking that comes from years of experience seeing what a bust looks like and the warning signs around a bust, right? Where you don't see a full season of consistent productivity. That helps create a signal that, okay, this is going to result in consistent productivity the following year. Well, we didn't have that with Christian Watson. Okay. I haven't seen Calvin Ridley play football. Right. And with T. Higgins, he's always been volatile and he is, not the primary option. And you look at Jalen Waddle, not the primary option. He's underperformed as well. But at least he's showing us these ceiling performances like we got last week where, okay, the potential is there, where we haven't seen much at all. 1 good week, really, 1 week. You're like, oh, this guy helped me with T. Higgins. That's just not good enough. But of all those guys, man, Christian Watson's looking like the biggest bust.
I didn't even
because when he's playing, right? It wasn't like a torn ACL. He had a hamstring injury. He's come back, but when he's played on both sides of this hamstring injury, it's been just unimpressive. And you're like, wait a second, this guy's healthy, supposedly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Jayden Reed looks better. Like Jayden Reed just looks like the better, smoother player. And the funny thing is, that's what everybody that was at the Senior Bowl will tell you. They were like, Christian Watson was really good at the Senior Bowl, but he was not Jayden Reed, right? Because Christian Watson was one of the better receivers at the Senior Bowl the previous year, right? And then, in the 2023 Senior Bowl, it was a consensus. It was Tank Dell and Jayden Reed, right? That was it. Those are the 2 best receivers. And then there was a Michael Wilson and a Puka Nacua, and then you could argue the guys below those 2, the big 2. But Tank Dell is 5'6", so there wasn't no one was saying, hey, this guy's a 1st round pick. Jayden Reed, there was an argument coming out of the Senior Bowl. This guy should be a 1st round pick. And now we're seeing apples to apples. It's not clear to me who's better. And if it's not clear to you who's better, how the hell are you picking that guy in the 3rd round? It didn't make any sense. And even you had other people that were like, oh, this Romeo Doubs guy. Right? And it's like, well, so you pick. There's just too many solid options for a quarterback that has never proven to be an accurate passer. So that was one of those early picks, those early wide receiver picks that mystified me. And the beauty is Travis Etienne saved me from a lot of Christian Watson because they were going around the same time in drafts. And I was trying to build a bunch of teams around Travis Etienne as my hero RB. And basically he just saved me. Like he wasn't saving me from T. Higgins. Okay. But he did save me from Christian Watson. So I appreciate that. Now we talk about the Vikings, right? Justin Jefferson. Whew, man, it's total lost season without Kirk Cousins. Even when Justin Jefferson comes back, The idea that he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver without Kirk Cousins, I think is a fiction. That's just not possible. So, given that, who do you believe is going to be the 101 in fantasy drafts next year?
Man, that's a good question. Especially, I mean, I think like the first thought. I mean, I think it has to be either Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill is probably the answer right now. But I think that it could still end up being Ja'Marr Chase because of the age. Because fantasy managers love age. They always bring the older guys down and will find a reason. So
That's right.
I think Ja'Marr Chase would be my dark horse pick because I think it should be Christian McCaffrey, but they're going to see 27 and be like, he can't possibly be number 1.
Oh, he's going to be 28.
28.
Oh, that's even worse. You know the age apex for running backs? Get
28.
this. The age apex for running backs is 24 and a half.
Oh, wow.
24 and a half. That is when they peak because the best running backs come out at age 21. So they got their age 21 season, age 22, age 23. Travis Etienne is having a career year at age 24.5.
Wow.
Just makes sense. And he missed his whole rookie year. Think about that. Christian McCaffrey is 27.4 today. He is going to be 28 when the season starts in 2024.
Wow. I don't see how he's the number 1 pick at 28 years old. I just don't see where that happens. So I don't know. I feel like it could be Tyreek Hill, but I feel like that as fantasy managers, if Chase closes out the season anywhere near what we've seen the last couple of weeks, he's going to be the number 1 pick. Because I take it back. I don't see a 28-year-old guy running back being the number 1 pick in fantasy regardless. Maybe number 2, but I feel like someone's got to overtake him. Because Tyreek Hill will be 30 next year, right?
Oh, yeah. Now, there's a final element to this, which is, zero RB is going to be back with a vengeance next year because it worked this year. The few people that were doing it, like myself, it's worked better than it ever has. It's been by far and away the best strategy because it protected you from a lot of these Nick Chubb busts that were due to injury or due to, general underperformance, but mostly injury. Saquon Barkley, it's been an injury, though the entire Giants offense has dragged him down as well, right? Austin Eckler, injury. Nick Chubb, injury. So zero RB saved a lot of people from a lot of these injuries that happened, or the Jonathan Taylor holdout that has just, precipitated a general, underperformance even once he returns. It was a very uneven offseason for Jonathan Taylor. So you knew even once he came back to the team that he wasn't going to, be vintage Jonathan Taylor until hopefully, week 8, week 9. And now all of a sudden he's picked up a new injury. And so of course this was destined to be a lost season all along for Jonathan Taylor. So zero RB protected you from all of those. And then you could still go hero RB with a Travis Etienne in the 4th round, or just go, pure zero RB with Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, Rachaad White, on down the board, David Montgomery. There were so many options. So I think that there's going to be a lot of reverse engineering what was successful in 2023, and there's going to be a rediscovery of zero RB, and that's also going to push up the wide receivers. It's going to push up Tyreek Hill. It's going to push up Ja'Marr Chase. I think it's going to be Chase and Hill. It depends on how they finish it out, but I would agree that you're onto something, and it's going to be Ja'Marr Chase. You're a smart guy. You know things.
You try when you sit here every day, all day, just staring at fake football and yards per route run and air yards. You gotta learn a thing or two.
Yeah, Chris Olave is underrated. You know things. So I'm guessing you were early picking up Rashee Rice.
Definitely, it was. I don't have a ton of shares of him, but not as many as I would have liked. But
Okay.
I probably have, as far as redraft goes, probably a quarter of my leagues that I was picking him up in, just because of the potential. Again, this whole upside, 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 black and white, whatever that we've been talking about, like he has that. Because when your number one wide receiver by far is 34 years old, no matter who it is, and you don't have a clear number two target in that passing game that also happens to be with like the best quarterback in the NFL, that's a value pocket you got to be buying
I
all
mean,
day.
come on, man, come on. Go to Player
It's
Profiler.
not
A
Sky
guy, a
Moore.
guy that he was a dominant college player, has the size, has the athleticism, and target rate. Okay, targets per route run on Player Profiler. Target rate, one of the highest target rates in the league, especially for a rookie. Very impressive. Also, Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson, right up there with Rashee Rice. God, there's so many guys that were at the Senior Bowl that weren't as good as Jaden Reed, but are great. They're great. They're all great in their own right. So, who do you think will be Kyler Murray's number one receiver when he returns?
Oh, it's got to be Marquise Brown. I mean, even before Kyler got hurt last year, I mean, Marquise Brown was commanding like Deontay Johnson levels of targets like every week. I mean, he was double-digit targets every single week. I mean, I love what I saw from Trey McBride last week, and 14 targets is nothing to sneeze about. But I'm a believer in Marquise Brown, and I think that Kyler Murray sets him up pretty well.
That was a trick question. I was trying to get you to say someone like Trey McBride. You didn't. You passed the test again. Great work. Is there a better trade target right now than Marquise Brown in fantasy football? I think you got to try to trade for this guy. I mean, it's kind of an obvious move. Like if you're in a league that's like only killers, they might give you the side eye, right? Being like, hey man, that's a little too on the nose. You're not going to get Marquise Brown from me. You think I haven't been paying attention to who's coming back from injury and the splits with Kyler Murray versus Josh Dobbs? You think I don't know these things? And it's like, okay, hey, no problem, dude. Like, I get it. You're really sharp. Congratulations, man. Cool. Right? But not every league has that guy that has Marquise Brown. In fact, a lot of the people that have drafted Marquise Brown maybe, are very amenable to a potential trade at this point.
Yeah, and his final two matchups in week 16 and 17 are Chicago and then the Eagles, who have given up the most points to wide receivers this year now.
Ooh. That's more evidence to stream Dak this week over Derek Carr, by the way. Though it is close. It is close. I'm still going Carr, but that's very good evidence. Because you want Dak throwing to the receivers. You want Dak throwing to CeeDee Lamb. You want Dak throwing to Brandon Cooks. You don't want Dak throwing to Jake Ferguson. Luke Schoonamaker. No, thank you. No, thank you, Dak. Stay focused. Stay focused. So yes, hard to find a better trade candidate, right? We got our Gabe Davis spike week. We're gonna be picking up Quentin Johnston, as much as it pains us, as pukey as that is, and we're just gonna be trading for a Michael Pittman just because they're underrated. Chris Olave underrated, but Marquise Brown of all. He rises above all those guys in terms of the perfect trade target. It's in your best interest just to try. Even if you think that it's too on the nose, if you think you're being too obvious, try. You could do a package where you try to mix it up and you try to sneak Marquise Brown in there. If you think that it's too obvious to do a 1-for-1 trade, do that. Now, Justin Fields, when do you think he's going to be back?
Oh man, it could be never. I mean, not never. I mean, never as in like not. I mean, it's probably going to be closer to week 11 or week 12. I think they're in no rush to get him back. The way that they're in right now, as far as draft position goes for next season, like there's just no urgency. Similar to the Kyler Murray situation, it's just like I don't think there's urgency, and they have no problem rolling out Tyson Bagent as long as they need to both help their draft position and make sure that Justin Fields is 100% healthy with the funny quotation marks.
Fields is going to look really good in an Atlanta uniform, don't you think?
I think so. I would love to see him in Atlanta.
He'll look gorgeous in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Love it. I'm already thinking about it. Fields to London. That's why London, he's a dynasty buy. that's where the upside lies right there. If you can get someone that can fearlessly throw the ball downfield, doesn't need so many pass attempts. He's such a target earner, dominating the target share, the air yard share, that they don't need to throw the ball 40 times in Atlanta. They just need to have someone who can keep the team competitive week in, week out. That's at the very least what Justin Fields is, if he's not going to be even better. Surrounded by that kind of weaponry, you have to think that Fields will elevate his game, because he's really struggled with some of the worst offensive line and protection around the NFL. I mean, Chicago has one of the the least talented rosters across the board. Offensive line being one of their biggest problems, their biggest weaknesses. And they just now got DJ Moore. Like before that, they had, didn't have a number one receiver. So I feel bad for the way that Justin Fields' career has started off, really a stop and start first 3 years to a career. He deserves a brand new opportunity, a fresh start in Atlanta with a competent offensive line, above average skill position players. Could be great.
Totally. I think that it's all it's going to take is just some form of competence. Like, Patriots probably the same example. Like even Mac Jones, like you switch Mac Jones and he gets drafted to the 49ers instead of Trey Lance. Like I don't think the production would be far off from where Jimmy Garoppolo or Brock Purdy was.
That's a great point. Now, Kendrick Bourne out. Patriots are finally going to be able to air the ball out. If there's one team you can throw against in this league, it's Washington. Is there a Patriots wide receiver you would play this week?
Well, no, but it is Washington, and no one has really been worse than them. But if I had to throw a dart, it's probably going to be Demario Douglas.
I knew it.
I
Demario
like him
Douglas, the third most looked up player on playerprofiler.com right now.
Wow. Yeah, he's commanding targets. He was like a training camp hero for them, and the second he's getting playing time, we're seeing him command targets and put up at least a little bit of production. I'm willing to bet on that.
We talked about this earlier. Dolphins play the Chiefs in Germany. This is an early game on Sunday in Germany. Dolphins, Chiefs, who you got?
I got to take the Chiefs. I want the Dolphins to win, but championship pedigree, those teams usually win out more times than not.
The Chiefs haven't beaten anybody yet. I mean, the Dolphins haven't beaten everybody yet. So until the Dolphins beat somebody, I mean, call me when they beat somebody. How about that?
Yep.
I love just sounding like the oldest, crustiest football fan. I'm leaning into it. I'm leaning into this identity that I've crafted, and my response to the Dolphins is beat somebody. Why don't you beat somebody? Bills at Bengals on Sunday Night Football. Bills at Bengals, an incredible week for football, some incredible matchups, two of the best matchups we're going to get all year. Bills at Bengals, who you got?
I got to go with the Bills here. I mean, the Bengals had their best week of the season last week. I'm not sure if I believe in them. I also feel like after how last season ended with the Bills and the Bengals, Bills got a little bit of extra something to prove. Not like it's the Bengals' fault, but I just think that there's a little bit of added have this game circled on your calendar for them, and I think that the Bills are gonna find a way.
You were on a roll, Alex. You were doing so well. You were doing so well until you stopped believing in Ja'Marr Chase. Shame on you. Answer is the Bengals. It's a home game. They know they're gonna drop into that shell. They're gonna force Josh Allen to beat him deep. He's gonna get impatient. He's gonna make bad decisions. He's gonna be Josh Allen, and you got to go with the Bengals. I have a really good record this year picking games. So
yeah, I'm a Bengals guy more than a Bills guy, so I would love to see them win.
Just flip. You can flip. It's okay. You flip. Say Bengals.
Bengals.
There you go. See? Easy. Look at that. Okay. I'll get you out of here, buddy. Bold prediction. Hit me. Bold prediction for the season. Hit us. Go.
Man, I have to, because, again, if anyone follows me on Twitter, they know it, they see it, but it is what I truly believe in my whole heart. I'm going to say Rachaad White finishes the season as a top 12 running back. He's at the running back 22 at the halfway point. His matchups are going to lighten up. He's got some good ones coming up with some bad ones. They've unlocked him as a receiver. I think he finds his way. It's going to be number 12. It's not going to be any higher than that, but I think that he finishes as a top 12 running back when week 17 ends.
Tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.